Hello folks, welcome to my YouTube channel Watercolor Impressions. This week we are going to learn how to do one-point perspective painting in watercolors. There is nothing other than shows one-point perspective than a Toronto subway. Before you go, hit the subscribe button so you guys can get weekly video updates from our channel. And let's get started, guys. I'm going to establish the front face of the train, and that also gives our compositional where it sits. So I'm checking the angle with my pencil, and I'm also putting it on the paper. You could see I'm checking the angle, make sure my perspective is the angles are right from our reference. So once I get it, I'll merge the 2 points, which merges to 1 point at the end. As you can see at the end, it kind of looks like a V. And as soon as I got that point, I will just draw a straight line, and that's our horizon. And from that line, I'm going to draw certain lines, and which kind of shows V. And I'm also adding this square at the back of it because the subway ends there and the train comes from the tunnel. So I'm just putting lines here and there just to see where everything goes. And this also helps us where every detail goes as well. And once we establish this perspective line, and you can draw as much as line you want, but I'm a big fan of doing freehand perspective because I've drawn a lot of perspective drawings, and even though I put the lines, sometimes it might be harder when you start it. You can also use scale or ruler to draw these lines as well. As a beginner, it's also good practice. And now I'm adding the figure from a reference, and this also shows the scale of the train, and it also enhances a little bit of perspective. So I'm going to add layers of people from the foreground to the midground and the background. So it also takes us into that subway as a tunnel. And you can also see this is our major figure. Every painting I do, I also create some major figure. And that figure I added, he looked quite boring. He kind of standing facing the train. I don't want it, and I want him to walking towards us, toward the composition. And it also gives a little bit of a really good composition element. As you can see, I also added him. And this is another trick I do it. So I just make some zigzag lines, and that helps to segment the train compartments. So now I'm looking for major details from my reference, and whenever I paint, I don't put on all the details from my references. This is where the favorite quote recipe comes from: less is always more. So let's do our first wash. For the first wash, I'm gonna stain my watercolor paper. For staining, I'm using a little bit of yellowish grayish color, and you can mix any colors you want, but there's a lot of warmth in the painting, so I'm just gonna add a little bit of warmth in my wash, and I'm just going to paint all over it. This is just to kill the whiteness of the paper. And I did leave some white bits for the lights, which is at the top, because that's a brightest spot in the reference. Even though in the reference, it might look, because I did it like using a 1 point perspective, so this might be quite a little bit different from our reference, but we will capture all the essence from our reference, and we will create a 1 point perspective painting. And you can see I did a stain wash for the train. At the bottom, I'm introducing a lot of cadmium yellow. So this strip exists on all the Toronto subway line. So this is just to show that don't cross the line before you're entering the train or while waiting for it, because people sometimes got stuck in the train while the train comes to the station. So that's a good way of telling people not to cross that line. And even that also helps us to create a little bit of color in our painting as well. And now I started doing the figures. For the figures, I'm going to do the face first, and I want to make sure that it's stronger in the foreground and it gets less stronger at the background. And you can also see, even though there is no figures on the other side of the platform, I also added them, but with a quite simple stroke. And now this is our major figure, so I'm going to spend a little bit of time, and I'm also going to create a little bit of contrast on him. And you could see I made him a blue shirt because that goes to really complement well with the yellow strip on the ground. So, and it also helps to unify the painting a little bit. You could see I'm also adding the figure at the background, and they are going to be a simple shape. That's it. And for the details of the background, that's also going to be a simple stroke. And there's also this blue rectangular shape I put in. Those are called bell telephone lines, and that does exist in Toronto subway, so I add that as well. So these are some wires I'm going to add at the top. Even though there's like hundreds of wires in our reference, I'm going to simplify it in a way that it's going to be even like 4 or 5. And as I said, when I paint, I don't put all the details. As I said before, less is always more. And I'm also trying to paint it as confident as possible. What I mean by that, when you paint, you shouldn't dab on your painting. It should have a single stroke, and it have to be a super crisp line. And that shows a lot of confidence in painting as well. Even though this is a painting about perspective painting, one-point perspective, I'm giving a lot of advice on painting. So this is a bit which is makes watercolors the best medium error and painting wet surfaces. So I wet the wash in the middle because I don't want that much paint there, because that's going to be a light reflecting on the ground. I'm going to bring the wash all the way to the foreground. And I'm also putting some water, and so that it gives that line and shows that it's a light which is reflecting from the top surface. And before it dries out, I'm going to put a value there. But when I do it, I want to make sure that I don't overdo this. When I put that wash, it kind of become a little bit bigger, so I'm trying to make it smaller. So now the major figure reflections, I want to get this as a little bit darker because since they are in the foreground, and that also acts as a little bit of lead in. So I'll put a little bit of marks on my paper, and I'll just put some water on it, and I'll just make it bleed from top to bottom. And I'm taking my brush which I painted first, so I'm just like trying to paint it again so that I'm getting some directional lines. And this is how it looks like once it dries out, even though it was darker. And now it looks really good because I also made the wash a little bit on the cool side because there's a lot of warmth in the ground. So now I'm taking white paint to bring back some of the eyelets on the figure, as well as wherever I can see the eyelets, and I'll just bring it back. And there's also lights, which is also on our train, and I'm also adding that as well. And this part is really important because it also, the reflection which is coming from the top lights, I'm also adding that as well. And there's also reflection as well, I'm adding that. So when you do this step, make sure you don't overdo it. Make sure, as I said, always less is more. So I want to have a lot of details in the foreground, and as it goes to the background, I don't care about it all. I'll just keep it minimal as possible. And you can see we also took the reference, which is a little bit of perspective, and we also made that to 1-point perspective, and to prove a point, it also worked pretty good. So there's also a light which is in the front headlight, and it also be reflecting on the ground, and it also gives a little bit of foreground element as well. It looks a little bit lighter because we made the ground a little bit lighter, so I'm just gonna go with the impression, the vision we had, so I'm just gonna go with it. So you can also see the lights, the blue light and the warmer light, which is also reflecting on the ground as well as at the top part of the subway as well. So now it's your turn. Take my reference and drawing template, and let's see what you can come up with. Thanks again for watching this 1-point perspective painting in watercolors with me. Let me know what you guys think about this video in the comment section. If you want me to cover any other subjects in watercolors, or write me at watercolorimpressions@gmail.com or comment below. Before you go, hit the subscribe button so you guys can get weekly video updates from our channel. And please do share with your friends and family. And good luck with your painting, folks.